Shabbat Shalom Mishpacha. Our lecture today will be on the Parshas, Torah Parsha 13, and it's the book of Exodus, chapters 1, where we have our Parsha Shemot. Now, I know that this may not be the same. We do not follow the same timeline of the lunar followers or the lunar Jewish calendar. We do not follow that. We follow the solar calendar. Based on the solar calendar, this is our Parsha from chapter 1. So we may not be exactly in line, and it doesn't really matter, because at the end of the day, we are studying Torah, and we are studying the ancient ways and how the temple in the ancient times functioned on the solar days. It did not have any calendar based on a lunar cycle. Therefore, we do not follow a lunar cycle. And this can be verified in history. I mean, we don't need to argue about calendars. You simply go back to history and check how the temple functioned. And that should answer your question. So, in this Parsha, this is the point where the house of Levi is going to start to become a little bit prominent. Because here in this Parsha, what we see is that the children of Israel, they multiply in Egypt after moving there with Jacob. They are threatened by their growing numbers by the new king, the Pharaoh. He enslaves them and orders the midwives, the Hebrew midwives, Jewish midwives. He orders them to kill all the male babies. This is Shifra and Puah. And they do not comply. They do not kill the male children. And then Pharaoh commands his people to cast the Hebrew babies into the river Nile. Then what we have at this point is the child is born to Yocheved, who is the mother of Moses, the daughter of Levi, and her husband Amram. And Moses, because this is a time when Hebrew children are being killed by the people of Pharaoh. And by the way, this killing, a lot of people may not know that the person who advised these killings was no other than Pharaoh's advisors. Pharaoh had 3 or 4 key advisors, and one of those advisors was the one that advised the killing of the children. And there was the person as Job. He was one advisor. The person as Balaam, the magician, he was another advisor. And the person as Moses' father-in-law, Jethro, he was also an advisor to Pharaoh at the time. So all 3 are called into Pharaoh to give advice. And Jethro at this point says to Pharaoh not to do anything. In other words, do not do anything to the children, the Jewish children. And he says that the best thing to do is to do nothing. Let them be, and let them grow, and let them carry on, and things will work out. That is the advice given to by Jethro. So Jethro becomes the father-in-law of Moses as a result of his great advice. But his advice wasn't taken. Then there were 2 other advisors. One was Job, and one was Balaam. And based on those 2's advice, on one of those 2's advice, it was decided to drown the babies into the river, by the way. And so here what we notice is that Yocheved, the mother of Moses, gives birth to a child, and then they hide the child in a basket and float him on a river, where while this baby is floating in the river, this baby's sister was Miriam, who is the older than Moses, by the way. She is the sister of Moses, and she stands afar off, and she looks, and Pharaoh's daughter, Pharaoh had a daughter, she discovers the boy, raises him as her son, and names him Moses. And by the way, Miriam was the one who was watching the baby, and what we are told is that Moses' own mother, Amram, she becomes the baby's caretaking mother. In other words, Pharaoh's daughter employs Amram's wife, Amram is a husband, Amram's wife, Yocheved, she employs Yocheved to be the baby's mother to feed her milk. So Moses grows up in the Pharaoh's household, and he grows up as a prince in the luxuries of the Pharaoh. And he grows up, he sees the hardship of his people. He sees an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, and he kills the Egyptian. And in fearfulness, he then runs away. That's the basic story. He runs away, and the reason why he runs away is when he sees two Jews fighting, one admonishes him and says to him, "Are you also going to kill us, just like you killed the other guy?" And so Moses then decides to run off and not be found guilty of what had happened. So when he runs off, he sees Jethro's daughters, and they are feeding their flock. He helps them to water the flock, and Zipporah then is the one that becomes his wife. And we also know that in this Pasha, God appears to Moses in the burning bush. God gives Moses his name. He says, "I am is my name." And he instructs Moses to go to Egypt, and he says, "Let my people go so that they may serve me." And Moses' brother Aaron is appointed to serve as a spokesman in Egypt. And Moses and Aaron assembled the elders of Israel to tell them that the time of their redemption has come. The people believe it, but the problem is the Pharaoh refuses the people to go. And this is where the miracles come in, and where all the things happen to help the children of Israel leave Egypt. And we are told that in Exodus 1:1-2 that the children of Israel came into Egypt: Reuben, Shimon, Levi, and Judah. These are the first four mentioned. The reason why, they were already counted before, but the reason why they are counted again is that at the time of their death, this was God's love for them. So in order to express God's love for them, God recounts these people. For they are like the stars which He takes out and brings in by number. And as it is written in the book of Isaiah the prophet, chapter 40, verse 26, He takes out their host by number, He calls them each by their name. And this was also said by Rashi, one of the Jewish scholars. And we are also told in the book of Exodus that Joseph died, and all his brothers and all that generation, in verse 1:6. Joseph lived to 110 years and was the shortest lived of his brothers. Levi lived to 137 years, and he lived the longest. And then we had, after Levi's death, we're estimating around 116 years from Levi's passing to the Exodus. And it's a cumulative total of 116 years, and not shorter than 86 years. Miriam was the older sister of Moses, and I always say this, and I always recommend that not to use the word Mary as a name, because Mary's name's meaning is bitterness. And I can assure you that those of you who call yourselves Mary, or your children Mary, your child, if you use this name is nature, and the nature will come onto the child at some point. Maybe for a short period of time, they will get bitterness in their life. This is why I recommend to use good names that have good meanings, because these are things that our experience has borne out, that do not use names that have meanings that can affect the people's lives. So let's look further what's going on. We are told that the children of Israel were fruitful and proliferated and multiplied and grew very, very strong. So we are told, according to the Midrash, that they would give birth to 6 at a time. Fruitful equals 1, proliferated 2, multiplied 3, grew strong 4, and 5 and 6 apply to the very. and says that there arose a new king over Egypt, who knew not Joseph. Some say that is actually a new king, others say it was the same king with new decrees, who knew not Joseph, who acted as if he did not know Joseph, since in either case he surely knew about Joseph and his salvation of Egypt. And we say that in verse 110 it says, "Let us deal wisely with them." Pharaoh himself took hold of a basket and shovel. All who saw Pharaoh with the basket and shovel working in bricks did likewise. The Jews came too and diligently worked with him all day, for they were strong and brawny. When evening fell, according to the Midrash, Pharaoh placed taskmasters over them and said, "Count how many bricks they made." He then said to the Hebrews, "This number you shall deliver to me each and every day," appointing the Egyptian taskmasters over the Jewish officers and the Jewish officers over the people, according to the Midrash. Said the Rabbi Akiva said the following: "In the merit of the righteous women of that generation were the Israelites delivered from Egypt." Pharaoh only insisted that they make the prescribed number of bricks each day. Then he commanded that they should not be allowed to sleep in their homes, so they not should be able to have children. So the taskmaster said to them, "If you go home to sleep, you will lose a few hours each morning from your work when we send for you, and you will never complete the allotted number." So they made them sleep on the ground out in the field. And the daughters of Israel, they will go down to draw water from the river, and God would send them small fish into pitchers, which they drew up half full of water and half full of fish. Then they set 2 pots on fire, one for hot water and the other for the fish. They sold the fish and brought wine, which they carried to their husbands in the field, and washed, anointed, fed, gave them to their drink. They would then take out their mirrors and look into them with their husbands, teasing them, "Look, I'm more beautiful than you," thus arousing their desire and cohabiting with them among the sheepfolds, as it is written, "When you lie among the sheepfolds," in Psalm 68:14. It was these mirrors which God later commanded Moses to use in the making of the washstand in the sanctuary, which is commanded in Exodus 38:8. And it says that when the women had conceived, they returned to their homes, and when the time of the childbirth arrived, they went and were delivered in the field beneath the apple trees, as it was written, "Under the apple tree I brought you forth." Song of Songs 5:5. God sent an angel from the high heavens who washed and strengthened the limbs of the babies in the same manner that a midwife straightens the limbs of a child, as it is said, "And as for your nativity, in the day that you were born, your navel was not cut, neither were you washed in water to cleanse you," in Ezekiel chapter 16 verse 4. He also provided for them 2 round stones, one for oil and one for honey, as it is said, "And he made him to suck honey out of the rock and oil from a boulder." And when the Egyptians noticed them, they went to kill them, but a miracle happened, and the children were swallowed in the ground. The Egyptians brought oxen and plowed over the ground, as it is said, "The plows plowed upon my back." After they had departed, they broke through the earth and came forth like the herbage of the field, as it is said, "I caused you to multiply as a bud of the field," in the book of Ezekiel chapter 16 verse 7. When the children had grown up, they came in flocks to their home, and God revealed himself by the Sea of Reeds, or the Red Sea. These children recognized him first, as it is said, "This is my God, and I will praise him." This is in Exodus 15 verse 2. The more they afflicted them, the more they multiplied. And we are told that the Jewish people were called a leafy olive tree, fair with goodly fruit, according to the book of Jeremiah, chapter 11, verse 16. Just as the olive is marked out for shriveling while it is yet on its tree, after which it is brought down from the tree and beaten, and after it has been beaten, is brought up to the vat and placed in the grinding mill, and where it is ground and then tied up with the ropes and then stones and brought, and then as at last it yields its oil. So it is with Israel. The heathens come and beat them about from place to place, imprison them and bind them in chains, and surround them with officers, and then at last do Israel repent, and God answers them. By the way, this is according to the Midrash. Okay, so let's see if we can see anything else in here that will help us understand the story more. Now notice this, that in this case the Pharaoh allowed the girls to live and the boys to die. But the way the Pharaoh allowed the girls to live and the wording that is used in there, it actually illustrates a further point. Tachayyun in the Hebrew, for them to live, it simply doesn't just mean to live. It means that the girls were to be spiritually indoctrinated with the Egyptian society and the Egyptian normal life, which was, full of perverseness and all sorts of bad things. Similarly, if we look at this, that the reason why the boys survived and the girls also, the reasons why was because the women who were the midwives, they refused to do what Pharaoh had asked for. They refused to follow through with Pharaoh's ideology. Now, had they not done that, then they would have, the children would have, of course, died. Also notice that there was Torah. The Torah that was there was taught to the boys, so the boys had actually some kind of foundation. Whereas today, in our modern times, we try to pick schools and we send our children to school only to indoctrinate them with all the wrong philosophies of the world and all the wrong things of the world. And what happens is that if there's no Torah in their lives, there's no proper study of God's law, those children become rebellious and indoctrinated with spiritual folly, and they will end up doing exactly what everybody else is doing in the world. So beware of that in order to ground your children, make sure that you ground them at home, because you got to do this at home, or you're going to send them to some Jewish school. Ground them with at least the law of God. Start young, start early, start teaching them God's holy laws. Start telling them so they can develop, and as they grow, even though they'll be getting the wrong teachings in the school, at least they'll be getting the right teachings in the home, and in their young minds, they want to have the correct education so they can become the good children that they need to be. So this is very, very important. And we are told that there went a man, the scripture says, there went a man of the house of Levi and took a wife, a daughter of Levi, verse 2, Exodus 2:1. Question is asked, where did he go? And it says he went in the counsel of his daughter. Moses' father Amram was the greatest man of his generation. When he saw that the wicked Pharaoh had decreed, every son that is born you shall cast into the river, he said, in vain do we labor. He went and divorced his wife, or I should say separated his wife, and all the Israelites also enacted the same thing. But then when his daughter told him, Father, your decree is more severe than Pharaoh's decree. He only decreed against the males, and you had decreed against the males and females. Pharaoh only decreed concerning this world, you have decreed concerning this world and the world to come. In this case, in the case of the wicked Pharaoh, there is a doubt whether his decree will be fulfilled or not. In your case, it will certainly be fulfilled. So Amram went and remarried his wife, and they all arose and took back their wives. By the way, in the Jewish order of things, Jewish law or Hebrew law, Torah law I should say, in Torah law, if you put away your wife, and if your wife hasn't remarried anybody, in the time she is by herself, you are allowed to take her back as a wife. She can become your wife again, provided she hasn't married another person according to Torah. And therefore this what happened. Amram had put away his wife, and so did the other people, and they took back their wives, and then they carried on. And it says that he took his wife, and should have read he took back. Rabbi Judah ben Zapina said he acted towards her as though it had been the first marriage. He seated her in a palanquin, and Aaron and Miriam danced before her, and the ministering angels proclaimed a joyful mother of children. Why is she called daughter of Levi? She was 130 years old because the signs of maidenhood were reborn in her. By the way, according to the Midrash, she was already 130 years old when she gave birth. So Moses was born in the house, and it says when Moses was born, the whole house was filled with light. For it was written, and she saw him that he was good, and elsewhere it is written, and God saw the light that it was good. So they imply that Moses came with a light that shone in the house. Okay, so with that, I'm not going to go too far forward over here. I think I've done a little bit Torah study to help you, to guide you, and the rest you should do yourselves. You should go and read the Pasha, the Torah portion, which is in the book of Exodus, chapters 1, and you should read that, and you should go up to chapter 6. And you will complete the Torah portion, and it will help you to give you the story, what happened and what not, and guide you further, okay? Because this is a Torah basics for you to help you learn and understand. So I thank you for listening. Have a wonderful Shabbat, and Shabbat Shalom to you. Shalom, Shalom.